Hey everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap for the week. It's been a crazy week. This is going up early in the week actually, but we already have multiple news videos out on all of the Computex announcements from the past week. There's still other news, Windows 11 for example, discussion advancing further. We'll be talking about some false marketing class action complaints filed against Dell recently, going over NVIDIA DLSS coming to Linux as well, and talking about some GN updates on the fan testing machine. That's case fans, not like viewers. Just to be clear on that. Before that, this video is brought to you by Kioxia, said to be the original inventors of NAND flash memory and formerly known as Toshiba memory. Kioxia's XG6 M.2 SSD is a high-end NVMe SSD claiming up to 3180 megabytes per second read and 2960 megabytes per second write speeds sequentially, and it's ideally used in high-performance gaming PCs or power-conscious laptops. The XG6 is available up to 1 terabyte, and the company also has its BG4 SSD in a much smaller M.2 2230 form factor for up to 1 terabyte of ultra-compact storage. Learn more about Kioxia at the links in the description below, including about their enterprise storage products. So first, just some GN behind-the-scenes stuff if you're interested in it. There's time bars over there if you're not. But power supply testing, fan testing, and general topics that we're doing videos on right now. Just wanted to give a quick update for those of you who are curious about that stuff. So let's start with power supply testing. Power supply testing stuff, we just filmed a video of this. This is the Dell G5 power supply. Actually surprisingly good. It is a very redeeming part of the machine other than not being a standard, unfortunately, that can be slotted in elsewhere. But the real reason we did the review on this was sort of as practice. So we've had power supply testing stuff for a while. We've only ever produced 1 or 2 videos with it. One was a review of the Walmart pre-built system power supply, also surprisingly good. And so we use this as a vessel to learn more about doing power supply testing, figure out how we want to present it in video format, what charts make sense, and better educate ourselves on power supplies in general. So Patrick Stone headed that up. He's featured in the video as well, and it's either up already or will be shortly. But the point is, in that video, we talk about some of how power supplies work. We do some data presentation, show you what sort of numbers to look for, and hopefully we'll be able to do this a little bit more going forward. My vision for our approach to power supply testing at a very top level is more similar to how we do coolers than anything else, meaning with similar frequency to coolers. So maybe 1 every month or 2, depending on how busy that month is. And we have some cool ideas lined up for it. It is not going to be a frequent thing, but it's going to be something that we do have ideas for. We've got a good process now, and Patrick Stone's been learning a lot about power supplies. He already knew a bit, so that's where we are with that. We always like to take our time and educate ourselves. So all of that said, if you know a lot about power supplies and you do see stuff that we could improve on in the videos, or you see a mistake or something, obviously in that video comment section, let us know and we'll read it and work on it for the next one, because that's part of the process of learning. We are not going to start out at the same high level with power supplies as we do with other reviews we've been doing for a decade now. So that's that side of things. Case fans, in the moving video update where we showed some of the new location pre-renovation, we talked about the desire to purchase a case fan testing machine and talked about some of the pricing for that. So we've submitted payment at this point for the case fan testing machine. It's extremely expensive, but the statement I made in that moving video was basically, we're not going to make ROI on this anytime soon, like as in it'll take probably years, because it's for reviewing case fans, and we can apply it to coolers and to cases, and even the GPUs to some extent, but ultimately it's for fans. And it's only for fans. We should start a page for that somewhere and call it something about how it's just only for fans, I don't know. But anyway, the machine is, I think after the modifications we've made to it, it has ballooned a little bit to $48,000. It is cleaning out the bank accounts in a sense, but I'm really excited about it. I want to work with it. It's the most excited I've been about a testing machine, apparatus, piece of equipment, whatever, for a long time. So we're excited about it. It's going to take several months to build, and they'll have to ship it, obviously. It's getting calibrated. It fits all testing standards for fan manufacturing, actually, that are relevant. So manufacturers use this same type of machine. Some of them have the same exact machine. although we've done modifications to fit up to 200mm fans. So that's neat. But anyway, you won't really see anything about that probably until, let's call it November, just to be safe because of shipping timelines and validation. But that's the plan. It's been paid for at this point, so it'll happen. That puts us at probably in December, January, for when we're actually feeling pretty good about showing it, because we need to, again, learn about it, learn a lot about fans before we progress with it. So the only reason it's possible we can buy equipment like this now, again, is because of Patreon, patreon.com/gamersnexus, where you can get some behind-the-scenes videos, and because of the store on store.gamersnexus.net, where we sell stuff like these mouse pads, we sell mod mats, mouse mats. We've got toolkits on the way back in stock. They're not here yet, though. But thank you to everyone who's made this type of stuff even possible. I never would have been able to dream of being able to buy a machine that expensive to do cool stuff like testing fans that we're not aware of many of any other media outlets that have that equipment. So thank you for supporting us in that. And there's one other thing. Oh, yeah. The content right now. So lots of this stuff the last few days has been news. We're aware of that. It's because Computex happened. Normally we shoot this kind of stuff on the ground in Taiwan for Computex, and it's a lot of fun. It's my favorite place in the world, and it's my favorite show to do. Love Taipei. I love the show Computex specifically. We get to meet with a lot of engineers there and really learn a lot. So unfortunately, we didn't get to do that, obviously, in person this year, but we still wanted to report on the announcements that came out of it, and that's why you got a bunch of news videos. It's just not as clear this time that it's from an organized trade show. That's why it's all dumped at once, since obviously we're not shooting on location, so it's not as clear from context of the video. Why are these guys talking about news so much right now? That's why. Just wanted to update everyone on why the content was so news-heavy the last week or so. Okay, all that stated, let's get into the news for this one. And then it'll be a lot of content after this as we get into the review window for other products coming out. So Windows 11, potentially inbound. We talked about this a little bit in the last one, but we have some more information now. Microsoft is brewing, it looks like a substantial update to Windows 10, and it might be more of a full changeover to Windows 11. So it looks like Microsoft is finally ready to take the wraps off of what the update coming up entails. That update is codenamed Sun Valley, by the way. Microsoft has announced an event for June 24th where it will detail, quote, the next generation of Windows. We know that to some extent, Sun Valley is a substantial overhaul of the desktop and user interface. Among a new start menu and taskbar. We've also seen refreshed icons for Windows File Explorer. There's reportedly also going to be other UI changes, a new set of fluid animations, among other things. Beyond the UI, Microsoft is also looking to completely overhaul the Microsoft Store to allow third-party apps and commerce inside of the store. This would bring along with it a change to the revenue model for Microsoft Store. So Microsoft Store not too popular right now, but with third-party commerce comes the absence of a cut for Microsoft. So if, for example, let's just pick an easy one, Fortnite is on the Microsoft Store, Fortnite sells something in the game through its own platform, Microsoft would never see that transaction and therefore wouldn't even know about being able to take a cut to begin with. So if this happens the way it sounds like it will right now, that would be more in line with, apt to the analogy, the Epic v. Apple fight that's going on right now, where Epic is pushing Apple to reduce its cut taken of sales and potentially change how it handles sort of intra-app commerce. So these changes might be enough here to prompt Microsoft to trot out a new number for Microsoft Windows, and that number would probably be 11. Not necessarily. We've seen people skip numbers in the past, but probably it's 11. Microsoft is continuing to allude to the number 11, though, as you can see in a tweet from Microsoft, where if you look at the light shining through the logo, it looks like an 11, or they're just trolling all of us. Some have also pointed out the start time of the event here, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Moreover, Microsoft's Yusuf Mehdi tweeted that he hasn't, quote, been this excited for a new version of Windows since Windows 95. Obviously, the keyword here is version, and it's the first time we believe anyone at Microsoft has mentioned a new version, as opposed to the word update previously. At this point, we won't have to wait long to see what Microsoft has been working on, and we'll be sure to put it in another hardware news video. Even though it's software news, it's important for everything we do here, because Windows is still the main platform that we look at anyway. Up next, Atari is launching the Atari VCS to the public. Yes, it is happening. Atari is preparing a public retail launch for its Atari VCS console, and this was long delayed, but it did finally ship to early backers already, and it wasn't clear at the time when we reviewed it if the Atari VCS would ever come to everybody, to the public who aren't backers. And we have one of our viewers, by the way, to thank for loaning us his Atari VCS so we could test it. So the pricing, unfortunately, is a little bit of an ask, as they say in the corporate world. It's expensive. The Atari VCS Onyx base is set at $300. The all-in bundle is $400, getting close to the price of a console there. And that includes a wireless joystick and a wireless controller. So the extra $100 gets you those things. Now, despite our criticism of Atari, we did say in our coverage of the Atari VCS that it's actually not a bad device. It sort of the recap of it was we thought there were some really good engineers who really wanted to make a good product, matched with executives who wanted to make a scam. That's kind of what it seemed like it was, because it was actually shocking how well designed the thing was overall, on a hardware level especially, but a lot of the other stuff just didn't make any sense. So anyway, our conclusion in that back then was that if you bought it as an early backer, especially closer to $200, might actually be worth it, but much higher than that, it's really hard to justify. So the console itself is driven by an embedded Ryzen R1606G APU. That is built on GlobalFoundries 14nm process. It's AMD IP, obviously, and that's a dual-core Zen-based part that uses Radeon Vega 3 graphics. And other specs include 8 GB of DDR4 2400, there's 32 GB of onboard eMCC storage, and an M.2 slot to go with it. And you can do some interesting stuff like install your own Windows OS, which we tried and talked about in our review. At that price, you have a retro-inspired console competing with the Xbox Series S and the PS5 Digital Edition. And we likely don't need to remind you what hardware those consoles have compared to an R1606G APU. Further, you can play most of the Atari games not only for free, but free and legally on archive.org. They're just stored there. So if you want to play those games, you can do it. I mean, obviously there's a lot of other ways too, dating back to Flash sites from 2 decades ago. But the point is, the games themselves aren't really a value add here. If you want to buy it, it should probably be for some specific reason relating to the hardware. Maybe there is one, but anyway, the catalog is not particularly compelling as a selling point for $400 anyway. Atari is marketing this as a PC/console hybrid, and they're doing that because you can install Windows on it if you want to. Color us skeptical, though, about how many users would actually use the machine this way. Certainly a few of them are out there. Maybe some of you are watching, but it's not going to be a common use for it. At any rate, according to Atari, anyone who wasn't an early backer in the crowdfunding campaign is now in a position where you have the opportunity to buy it, and they're saying on June 15th, if they don't delay it for 2 years this time. The console will be available from Atari directly and some retailers, Best Buy, Micro Center, GameStop, et al. If you've been keeping up with our YouTube channel and Twitter, you've seen that we've detailed our own frustrations with Dell in recent months as customers. These frustrations range from scummy business tactics that Dell has employed to exceedingly low-quality pre-built gaming PCs. The power supply on the table notwithstanding, actually. Dell's pre-built G5 5000 isn't worth considering, for example, even if all you wanted was the GPU. All that said, though, we now bring you news of other consumer frustrations with Dell, in case you got tired of hearing ours. We received an email on behalf of class action attorneys and whistleblower Brian Mahoney, David Kenny, and Steve Hochfelsen detailing a new class action lawsuit against Dell, or at least a class action complaint, regarding false marketing. The email title makes a strong point to immediately accuse Dell of, quote, cheating gamers, not the aimbot variety. So Robert Felter, who lives in California, and this is where the lawsuit is most immediately relevant, although a few states have been added, filed a class action lawsuit against Dell because he purchased the Dell Alienware Area 51M R1 gaming laptop, and the lawsuit alleges that Dell, quote, intentionally misled and deceived, what? No, buyers over the supposed upgradable components like the CPU and the GPU. The agency representing the lawyers has an open request to speak to consumers who purchased the Area 51M R1, quote, after being exposed to Dell's deceptive marketing campaign. When we were speaking with the agency, they said that there's no current course of action. You don't have anything you can sign up for right now. There's no payment. But they said that they want to speak with owners of the Area 51M R1 to learn about the spec of the laptop, the location of purchase, and some other info. They have a contact of inquiries at elitelawyermanagement.com. But the crux of the issue is Dell's marketing around the upgradable laptop. So when the Alienware Area 51M R1 was announced and launched in 2019, its marketing was heavily tinged with upgradability as the central feature. According to the lawsuit, Dell never clearly defined the limitations of that upgradability, at least not before anyone bought the R1 model. And it seems that Dell didn't clarify how upgradable these machines were until it launched the second one, the Alienware Area 51M R2. This is where the lawsuit starts to gain some potential traction. With the release model of the R2, Dell stated that the R1's upgrade path for CPUs and GPUs would be limited to models within that same generation. That is, Intel's 9th gen CPUs and NVIDIA's RTX 20 series. The newer R2 was much the same, although its CPUs would be locked to Intel's 10th gen. The problem is that all of the systems that shipped with flagship series 9000 series CPUs clearly have no upgrade path at all. It's unable to socket 10 series, and it is devoid of superior 9 series CPUs. It is therefore not upgradable. It is, however, downgradable. Not really a selling point, but maybe Dell could argue something about stepping down to a 9600 as a power saving upgrade or something like that. Just some ideas. So the GPUs were perhaps the most limited here. Users could only upgrade the GPU through a GPU upgrade kit that uses Dell's proprietary Dell Graphics form factor DGFF modules. Unfortunately, modules like this sort of make the component look a lot more future-proof than it is. Ultimately, though, if it's proprietary, it's non-standard, you have one supplier for it, and they just cut it off whenever, then it is e-waste. Not any different than anything else, except it was made to look a lot less e-waste-y than it ended up being. So the lawsuit points out that Dell's initial marketing and documentation never mentioned these plans. It claims that it misled users into believing the CPU and the GPU were upgradable beyond the current generation akin to desktops. In fact, Dell's marketing called this a, quote, mobile desktop, which the complaint says, quote, further cements its alleged material capability that the Area 51M is upgradable in the same way a desktop is upgradable. This apparently became a problem, again, when owners of the original R1 wanted to upgrade Intel 9th gen CPUs to a 10th gen, and anyone buying the highest end model would not be able to upgrade. So the easiest way out of all of this for Dell would have been to only ship it with, say, a socketable CPU, so a 9700K. That way it's always upgradable, even if it's not to the 10th gen. Still slimy, but maybe not illegal. Furthermore, according to the filing, quote, after his purchase, plaintiff later inquired about upgrading his Area 51M's core components, but learned that, contrary to Dell's repeated promises that the Area 51M is upgradable, none of the Area 51M's core components were in fact upgradable in any way. The Area 51M CPU was not upgradable to the new Intel 10th generation CPU, nor was its GPU upgradable to the new NVIDIA RTX 2000 Super Series. In fact, the only way plaintiff could own a laptop with these newly released upgraded core components was to spend several $1,000s more than what an upgrade would cost to purchase the then newly released Alienware Area 51M R2. The lawsuit is seeking the usual. It's looking for financial relief and lawyers' fees for not only the plaintiff, but for the consumers who purchased the Area 51M R1 in the states of Alaska, Arizona, California, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington. Also in Dell news, just briefly, as confirmed by The Verge, Dell has scrapped its Alienware graphics amplifier external GPU enclosure. Also proprietary. The word makes a resurgence in this news item. So this news comes on the heels of Dell trotting out the new Alienware X series gaming notebooks with the X15 and 17 models not featuring proprietary Alienware graphics amplifier ports. A little digging also shows that the port is missing from Alienware's M15, R5, and R6. In confirming the discontinuance of the port and the enclosure to The Verge, Dell didn't offer any details on why it was doing so. Reading between the lines a bit, the most obvious reason is the rise of the Thunderbolt interface, and indeed Alienware's new models come with Thunderbolt 4. In recent years, most eGPUs have relied on the Thunderbolt interface anyway, so this makes sense. There are still problems though. So the Alienware graphics amplifier port, it is proprietary, and it used a mixture of PCIe and USB signals to do the communication. But in getting with the times, moving to Thunderbolt Makes more sense. The problem is moving away from another device that was proprietary and owners of it losing support. The Verge's report notes that the support page for the product was last updated in April, though support for the latest AMD and NVIDIA graphics cards was not added. Up next, Steam's hardware survey for May of 2021. Steam's hardware and software survey is out with the monthly update, and it continues to highlight two key trends that we've been pointing out. One is the continued rise of AMD's Ryzen CPU adoption, offset by its recent decline as the second point in GPU adoption among Steam users. The biggest win for AMD is finally crossing the 30% share mark on Steam's CPU charts, as AMD moved from 29.48% in April 2021 to 30.13% in May of 2021. This is a trend that has been building for several months now, and as we show the numbers on the screen, they might change a little bit because it does sort of update on a bit of a latency, but it's only been compounded by the popularity of AMD's Ryzen 5000 CPUs. However, that win comes with a stinging trade-off. AMD is actually losing share in the GPU charts, having tumbled down a bit to 16.18% share in May. Also, May 2021 marked another month where not a single RX 6000 series card at the time of filming emerged on the Steam charts. We pointed out that the RTX 3060 recently and finally made its debut toward the bottom of the charts. This month, that card has notched another 0.10% gain in share points, moving up several spots. Elsewhere, the data in the survey is much the same month over month. For instance, the GTX 1060 at 8.95%, despite continually shrinking in share, is still the most popular GPU among Steam users. The margin is still surprisingly wide as well. The closest card is the 1050 Ti with 6.71%. Quad-core CPUs on that side of things are still the leaders at 40.38%, but 8-core CPUs continue to be the fastest growing among Steam users at 13.25%, marking a 0.38 point increase. Up next, some DLSS news, except for Linux. So this is kind of interesting. On top of the 3080 Ti and 3070 Ti announcements, NVIDIA also announced expanded DLSS support, also expanded for games. That's something we talked about in one of the Computex roundups, the second one that we published, I think. But Linux is covered here. So NVIDIA's DLSS will be delivered through Steam's Proton, and this is a compatibility layer that's based on Wine, Wine being the application that's often and for a long time been used on Linux for games compatibility, although we are aware that there are other ways to do it too, of course. But previously, NVIDIA's DLSS had two exclusive requirements. One of those was an RTX GPU, and the other was a Windows OS. It appears as if NVIDIA is starting to take Linux gaming a bit more seriously, which also aligns with Valve's previous declaration to better support Linux. NVIDIA claims that DLSS support for Vulkan is coming later this month, and that support for DirectX games will come this fall. The next story is going to be a bit dense, but it's interesting. It's packed with information from TSMC. It's from TSMC's Symposium that they hold, I think it's annually. So TSMC recently held an online-only Technology Symposium 2021, where it, over a 2-day period, covered highlights of new technology, process advancements, changes to manufacturing and supply availability, and what it's planning to do going forward, aside from, of course, just 7 nanometers. Starting with 7 nanometers, TSMC's 7 nanometer family is seeing a stall in overall adoption as TSMC's customers migrate to 5 nanometers. To that end, TSMC is only forecasting a 14% capacity increase for 7 nanometers throughout 2021, and that capacity progression will likely wane in the years ahead as TSMC's other nodes become more mature. We saw a similar trend when 16 nanometers peaked and customers moved on to 7 nanometers. TSMC's N6 process is a derivative of its N7 process and will continue to be important for the company. To highlight this, TSMC notes that while in Q4 of 2020, N6 only accounted for 15% of total N7 or 7 nanometer output, but that N6 will account for as much as 50% in Q4 of 21. TSMC also stated that its defect density metric, or what it calls an N6D0, is already achieving the same yields as N7, and for TSMC's 5 nanometer N5, it expects the capacity to quadruple by 2023. TSMC also spoke about its new Arizona plant, which has broken ground. We actually had a viewer send us some drive-by shots of the, not that kind, of the Arizona plant, showing that the ground had been prepared for, site work had been done, I think is what they call it. And so that's making progress. TSMC's new Arizona fab isn't expected to come online until 2024, and it will add an additional 20,000 wafers per month of capacity. TSMC notes that N5 has already produced better yields than any TSMC 7 nanometer node, and TSMC highlights the production learning curve and the defect density improvements it made with N6 and N7 as a reason for this. Of course, TSMC also points to the increased use of EUV on more layers with N5, and TSMC also shared that it accounts for some 65% of cumulative EUV wafers shipped. It said that it also represents a shocking 50% of the install base for EUV machines. That's extreme ultraviolet lithography for that. So moving on, TSMC had some stuff to say about the N4 changes as well. N4 is an optical shrink of its N5 node, and TSMC notes that it's an enhanced N5 technology, that it will offer a 6% smaller die area, as well as the usual iterative power and performance improvements going forward. N4 is already producing the same yields as N5, and TSMC says that production is scheduled, or rather risk production, is scheduled for Q3 of 2021. There are also some brief updates on N3, where the volume production is set for the back half of 2022. TSMC also introduced 2 new process nodes, and those are called N6RF and N5A. N6RF is an augmented N6 process with optimizations for 5G and for Wi-Fi 6 or 6E silicon, while the N5A option is aimed at automotive silicon. Last story is just some AMD keynote stuff. So we covered the AMD APUs, the laptop GPUs, that'd be the RX 6800M and the like, and we also talked about the really cool 3D V-Cache. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. It's just a short news video we did on that. We covered those. One thing we didn't talk about, actually 2 things, was AMD confirming RDNA infused Samsung SoCs inbound. This has been a story developing for a long time now, a couple of years actually, and confirming, perhaps again, that you can find RDNA, I think it was 2 GPUs, in Tesla cars, to which we said, try and scalp that one. You're gonna see on eBay, like, selling brand new Tesla, never driven, $90,000, just needs GPU. So for this Samsung Exynos stuff, we've been reporting on AMD and Samsung's graphics partnership since about 2019 when it was first announced. And in the years since, there's been little in the way of updates, other than Samsung confirming that an SoC with Radeon Silicon was on the way. That SoC is largely believed to be the successor to the in-market Exynos 2100 SoC. All that said, at Computex 21, Dr. Lisa Su delivered a brief update on the topic. Quote, "The next place you'll find RDNA 2 will be the high-performance mobile phone market. AMD has partnered with industry leader Samsung to accelerate graphics innovation in the mobile market, and we're happy to announce that we'll be bringing custom graphics IP to Samsung's next flagship SoC." Su also noted that this would include ray tracing and variable rate shading capabilities, and said that they're looking forward to the Samsung provision of more details later in the year. The highlights here are that, as Lisa Su mentioned, the custom graphics IP is based on RDNA 2, and AMD's variable rate shading and ray tracing will come to the silicon. There are technically other mobile GPU solutions that use VRS, but this would be the first mobile GPU implementation of ray tracing, or at least hardware that can do it in real time. For the record, Imagination Technologies has been sitting on ray tracing capable IP for years, such as its GR6500 GPU and C-Series architecture. However, as far as we're aware, none of that IP has come to market, at least not in a consumer device. It's likely we'll know more about this one in the back half of the year when the Galaxy S22 devices start rolling out. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching as always, and if you watched the update on the GN stuff, thanks for doing that. We're happy to share some of the behind the scenes, what we're working on with you. But as always, you can subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net or patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out directly. And we'll see you all next time.